just having a plan, having this knowledge, having like the fundamentals of like what goes on in the beginning when you're starting a business, when you're trying to make money, when you're trying to do anything, it's just so powerful because it just sets you up for long-term success. And I want all Black and brown women, women of color, women in general to have access to this type of information. Hello, welcome back to Lavi Rèv. I'm Olivia, the founder here at Lavi Rèv, and I'm so excited about this video today. So the reason I even wanted to do this video is just in response to this event that I went to a few weeks ago. And as you all may or may not know, so Lavi Rèv is a consultancy that I started that specializes in working with Black and brown women, women of color, and just giving them all of the access, resources, everything that I've, gathered in my career in banking, capital markets, financial services, working in New York, Paris, and Hong Kong. That's like the short version. Obviously, I'm back in New York now, and I go to events. I'm always having access to different talks and events and all these things. And I think one of the biggest takeaways for me is that I have to constantly be sharing that. I'm not just here doing all these things, for myself. To be honest, if it was for me, I would be back in Guadeloupe. But I know that part of my work and part of why I'm here in New York is to share this with you all, with my community, and to just give back. That's the point. That's why I'm doing this. So I had the opportunity to go to this event that the 15% had here in New York City. And the 15% Pledge is an organization that helps Black startups, Black founders, just in getting their businesses seen and heard and amplifying them. It's an incredible organization. I will leave links to everything in the description box. But they had an event called Make It Make Sense, which is just all about accessing capital and funding for Black entrepreneurs. Again, obviously right up my alley. Not just Black women, but women of color in general, Black, brown. It's just like so incredibly discouraging sometimes when you look at the numbers and you're like, this makes no sense. And I saw that firsthand as somebody who has always worked in this industry, just the lack of representation. And again, that's part of why I started my own business and why I'm doing what I do today. So that is the basis for this talk. And yeah, I just want to share everything that I learned with you so that one, you can have the access to the same knowledge, and two, you just know, like, what's the saying? If you know better, you do better. So I was all worried about like, oh, I have to have a perfect background. I'm just like sitting in my office. It's not decorated. It's very unaesthetic or whatever, but I just feel like it's important to say, and yeah, I wanted to share that with you all. And another thing that like kind of sparked me wanting to do this video was just this tweet. I will leave a link to it, or I'll put a picture if I can find it, but it's Chelsea Fagan. She's the CEO of the Financial Diet, a company that I love and just I support. But she was saying like, that she has the opposite of imposter syndrome, just because she knows how like in most professional settings, people are like deeply unserious and just like untalented. And I was cracking up because it is so true. Particularly as somebody who has made a career in banking, like once you, again, and after like a decade, I can confidently say that most people are deeply unserious and untalented, and like you're doing far better than you think. And a lot of these people just like, but just keeping that in mind, and because I know that when you don't have the support that you need, it can be really easy to kind of get in your head and think, oh, maybe this isn't right, maybe this isn't for me. But I want you to know that that's not true. You're deeply talented, and the fact that you even want to start your own business or do something new or try something new is proof of that. So don't ever lose sight of that, regardless of what you're doing in your business or your career. I definitely want to make sure I say that. So it's funny. I'm actually filming this. It's the end of March, and the World Economic Forum actually just put out an article about why Black women just aren't getting VC funding. This is something that I'm always seeing in the news and always just makes me roll my eyes because one, I know that it's true, but it can be really frustrating sometimes. So according to the World Economic Forum, support for Black entrepreneurs or just VC funding went down 45% in 2022. That is a huge dip. And essentially the article says that a lot of the funding or support for Black-owned businesses or startups or entrepreneurs is it's reactive. It's not proactive. Again, coming off of COVID and the 2020 and everything that happened with George Floyd and the protests, a lot of companies were like, yeah, change, woo. But then that was just in the moment. And now 2 years later, it's like, we're right back to having no support. One, that's frustrating. And two, it really mirrors everything that we were talking about at this event, where it's just like, you need to have a strategy from the beginning for your business. And I think I'm like always like screaming this from the rooftops about like planning, and you have to like have everything together, and you need a strategy at the beginning. And it is just so true. So I want to walk through all of the points that were made in this talk. So even though you weren't there, you can still have the same information. And then if you are trying to start your business, you can just have some ideas, some, things to consider as you're getting started. My goal with Lavi Rèv is never to all the information has to be here. Obviously it's a business and I know that some people can afford to work with me, some people can't, but I still want everyone to have the information, whether you can afford to work with me or not. The point is not to just hoard resources, and I think that's the biggest thing. So the event at Make It Make Sense, it definitely started off with something that I was like, yes, this is it hit, it resonated. And it's just the fact that you need to have a strategy from the beginning. So whatever project you're doing, if it's a for-profit business, a nonprofit business, whatever you're trying to build or grow, whatever it is that you're trying to do, you need to have a strategy from the beginning. If you know where you're and again, I feel like I'm always saying this to my clients, in my proposals, but it's you need to have a strategy in the beginning so that you know where to go and you can set yourself up for success along the way, particularly if you're trying to raise money. Most people don't know, at least in the US, or that there are other options besides banks to get funding for your businesses. The point that they made during this talk, 50% pledge talk, was that there are CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions. So these are financial institutions that are not banks, but they are set up to help develop and grow and foster the community. And especially post 2020, a lot of them are very much wanting to work with Black and brown women of color, people of color. They really want to see that happen. That's a part of their entire mission and why they do things. So my biggest thing in telling you this is that there are resources available. Maybe going the traditional way of a bank may not be for you, but there are other ways out there. There are small business grants. There are organizations that are nonprofits that just give out so much money here in the US. And I think it's such a luxury sometimes that I know I sometimes take for granted, or just realize yeah, that is an option here, because it's not like that everywhere. I've lived in other places, I've been in Europe for a while, Asia, but that's very unique to the US, in that there's so much money to be had for small business owners, particularly if you are organized and strategic and have all of your stuff together in the beginning. So I would absolutely say look into CDFIs, Google them, do research, see what's happening in your state to see if there is options for you to get funding, to get money, because that could be an option as well. And I think another big takeaway that I had, and I'm always telling people, is just be careful about how much money you take. If you do want to take out money from the bank or from any of these organizations, you really have to look at what it's going to cost you in the long run. And this is, again, another point, and all of this has sparked just thoughts in me after going to this event. So if you are not planning to scale your business, to grow, you don't want to be, the next Google or Amazon, whatever, maybe you don't need VC funding. Maybe you don't need to get, to that level. But I think if you are going the route of looking for investors and that route, you have to be prepared to sell your business. You have to have your exit strategy in the beginning. You need to plan out, okay, this is how I'm going to structure ownership. This is how I'm going to structure my shares, and be prepared for that in the beginning. Because essentially what you're doing when you are getting VC funding is you're selling shares, you're selling stakes in your company for money now that you'll be able to pay back later. So being aware of that and just understanding okay, I need to be prepared to sell my business, to scale it, to be able to, grow it to a certain point and then just give it. And if you're not ready to do that, then maybe VC funding isn't for you. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. It goes back to being able to have a strategy and a plan for yourself, understanding what your markers for success are and what kind of life you want to have. So I'll use myself as an example. Obviously, I know that my life is always going to kind of be between the US, Guadeloupe, France, maybe Asia. I'm really just trying to maintain it and figure out how I can spend more time on the villa in Guadeloupe and less time in the city. So realizing that now, early in the beginning, will save you so much time and headache in the planning stages of your business, because you'll understand where you're going, what you need, what type of documents you need to have. So when you're getting ready to speak to financial institutions, or you're trying to figure out, okay, what do I need? Where am I at in this process? I think it's really important to plan kind of in years and stages. So if you're in the beginning stages of your business, I would say between 0 to 6 months, maybe up to a year, that is the perfect time to be talking to CDFIs, looking for small business grants, accelerator programs. That's the really critical time. Think of it as a seed, and you're starting something. You need to keep watering it and you really need that support. That is the perfect time to kind of, really, really pour into yourself, your business, whatever it is that you're trying to do. I would say when you are more 2 years plus is when starting to look at banks and loans and that sort of, and funding is more of an option. One thing that investors really love to see is just proof of life, you know, like you have to be able to prove that you have a sustainable business, sustainable and viable business. Whether you're getting funding from VCs, whether you're getting a traditional loan from a bank, they want to be able to see a return on their investment. So in my experience and just from what I've seen and done in my career in life, it typically takes 2 to 3 years to kind of get a business up and running. I would say year 3. Most banks will look, again, and they're going to be looking at tax returns for those 3 years. They're going to be looking at your credit score really heavily for those 3 years. They're going to be looking at your cash flow. I would say giving yourself that time. And I know for me, because I do this all the time, it's just like learning patience and understanding that things take time and it's not going to happen all overnight. So just because you launch and, you know, you want everything to happen in a year, like that's not very common. It typically takes about like 3 years to really be, you know, set up, established growth, all that. So understanding where you're at in that process will really help you to kind of figure out like, okay, how much money do I think I will need? You can really analyze a lot after 1 year of being in business, particularly if you know like, okay, I may potentially want to get funding or go to a bank at some point in the future. If you're just like tracking your progress and what you're doing year 1, year 2, year 3 in your business, you'll have a really clear picture at the end of that to say like, okay, these are where the points are. This is where I know I need help. This is how much I know I need, you know, for my business. So those are some really key points when it comes to like thinking in like, okay, year 1, year 2, year 3, what type of financing do I think I need? So one of the things that like I know pains me and frustrates me is I know that there are so many women of color out there who have so many incredible ideas, and we already get limited resources as it is, right? I don't want any of you to waste those resources that you have. I want you to know, okay, like this is how I'm gonna do it. Like I don't want you to make these mistakes and waste your money or waste your time or have your business fail when it doesn't have to. It can be so successful. It's just like needing this kind of information and having these sort of discussions that is what's gonna help. I'm looking at my notes because I feel like I'm rambling a bit. I'm looking at the time, okay. Another point that I wanted to also drive was just like not compromising your values. You really have to be crystal clear in the beginning. And again, this kind of goes back to just understanding your why, having a really clear business plan, just knowing what your mission is. Like why are you doing this? What is the point? What is your end goal? Thinking about all that in the beginning, because I think not that you really don't want to compromise at all when it comes to your career. And I'm not saying that because I think it's easy or I'm like, oh, it's trendy, but you really don't want to compromise your values just to get money from some bank. You know, it's not worth it in the long run. And so just really do your research and understand and know what's fair, what's not. Really get clear on like what is a good interest rate, what's a fair interest rate, and what is just a scam essentially. Because I think there's a lot of really horrible financial practices and just like, I don't want to say it's exploitive, but like I think people kind of forget sometimes that like the financial system, at least in the US, is set up, it's a business. Like banks run and I could totally do a video on that of like what is the business model of a bank. Like banks are set up to make them money, not to make, yes, they like provide banking services and things, but like that is their business. So I think remembering that and just understanding that like if something feels off, and maybe it is, and just not taking deals or anything that jeopardizes your overall financial health and well-being, just being really, really crystal clear on that. So the example that Aurora James, so she's the founder of the 15% Pledge, she used the example that she spoke about in this talk was so powerful, where I think she got a loan for, I want to say like $70K or something, and wasn't looking at the interest rates or something, and was like, ended up over like the lifetime of this loan paying off like millions of dollars for this, just to get this $70K. So like she got a loan for $70K and then it ended up costing her over $1 million to pay off. That is so like, you know what I mean? Like that's not supposed to happen to anybody, but it's just ridiculous that even happens, but it is absolutely happens still to this day. Yeah, that story was absolutely insane to me. I was just like, but again, it's not surprising because I think it's kind of like, even in the US today with like the student debt crisis, like people sign things or read things or are told things that, you know, you're like, oh yeah, this has to be true. Like I should go into like all this debt for an education. It's like, I understand that it is a common practice in the US, but it's not normal and it shouldn't be okay. And it's not like good to take advantage of people just to make money. And I think that's something very common in the banking world, particularly for Black women, women of color. It's really easy to kind of just like get chewed up and spit out and like, boom, that's it. And I don't want to see that happen to you. I feel like I'm rambling a bit, but I hope it's making sense. I feel like so passionate about this, and like this is like my work. I know that this is what I'm meant to be doing. Just having a plan, having this knowledge, having like the fundamentals of like what goes on in the beginning when you're starting a business, when you're trying to make money, when you're trying to do anything. It's just so powerful because it just sets you up for long-term success. And I want all Black and brown women, women of color, women in general to have access to this type of information. So some key takeaways are just things that I would say to really look out for if you are starting your own business, looking for financing, just having a new project in general. So first and foremost would be having a really clear like why statement. Like part of your business plan and business model should be like, what am I doing this for? And like, what's the point? Get really clear about what that is, what your revenue structure is, how do you make money? Is this profitable? Just really understanding that. I can't downplay enough, and I know I said this in the first class that we had for like SWOT, like that we had on the Lavi Rèv Patreon, but just like I can't overstate how important the planning stage is, and to just really take time on that and get crystal clear. And everything will come. Your business will grow, you'll be successful, but really take time during the planning stage to just like get crystal clear about what it is that you're doing, why you're doing it, etc. The next thing would be really understanding the numbers. And I know sometimes that can be intimidating, and I don't mean it in an intimidating way. I mean, if you don't understand something, like Google it. Like I do that all the time, even now. Like if I don't understand something, or I'm like, oh, what is this? I Google it. I want to see like, what is like in like basic terms, like what's going on? Like, why does this matter? You know? So an example that I like to use is just understanding like cost of goods sold. So essentially that's like, if you have a business, how much does it cost you to like get the materials to make something? Say you have a business where you import everything from Portugal and you're in the US. Understanding like the trends in that, and like, wow, okay, what if something like the panorama happens again and shipping costs go down or up, or like how is that going to impact you, and like what is the trend looking like? Understanding how much it's going to cost you to run your business, that's really important, and one of the key numbers that I'm always telling my clients to look at. Understanding how much it's going to cost you to do business will really help you to just like get clear about what it is that you're doing, and if it makes sense financially, because maybe it doesn't, and then that allows you to pivot. Don't ever think just because you don't understand something that it's like not for you, or like, oh, I'm not good with numbers, so I can't. Like, that's not true. Like, you can be good with numbers, and like it really just is like baby steps. So understanding costs of goods sold, understanding interest rates. So like, I know that's obviously all over the news right now. It can be kind of like, this is like a critique I have of the US in general, but the way that the like news reporting in here is just so like, they use a lot of like scare tactics and fear, like doom and gloom, and trying to make everything like, you know, what's the good word? Dramatic. And it just doesn't need to be all that. So just like zoom out. I think that's something that like I'm so grateful for, like that I can just like zoom out sometimes and be like, okay, this is noise. Like what are interest rates actually doing? So understanding interest rates are just like how much it costs to get money. That's essentially what an interest rate would be. Getting clear about that. And then I would say also just like getting really organized with your financial statements. This is always the first thing that I do whenever I'm working with anybody, is just like get organized, you know, have processes in place, and they don't have to be like intimidating or hard or big or anything, but just get organized in a way that works for you, so you can have a clear understanding of like what your financial picture is looking like, what your business is looking like in general. That would be another really huge one, just getting really organized. And again, it goes back to being clear about what it is that you're doing. Once you're organized, you're clear, it makes the path a lot easier. And then the last thing I would just say is just like get really clear, especially if you're in the US. So depending on where you are in the world, get really clear about like the taxes, talk to an accountant if you can, or just really get the tax part out of it. And because I started my career at, I worked in financial services at EY, but it's also an accounting firm. So a lot of my friends and just people that I was around, even business school, everyone is like accountants. So I feel like from a very young age, I've been like very much aware of how taxes work in the US and just like what that means, and like get really clear on the taxes. Okay, so clearly everything has kind of changed. It is a few hours later now. I had to step out. I had a few meetings. We have some people in town from Hong Kong, like, and I got stuck in the rain. Like, I looked just disheveled. Like, this is the most me thing ever, obviously, but wanted to obviously come in and still finish up the end of this video. I think the last thing I was talking about was taxes and just getting really clear and understanding what the tax laws are, what the percentages are. I always recommend like over saving for taxes. You'd rather be in a position where you can like handle whatever your tax bill may be versus like potentially owing a huge amount and not being prepared for that at all. So that is everything. I really, really love this type of event, to just be in a room full of other Black and brown women and just be talking about things like this, and just, it's really comforting to know that others are going through like similar things across industries. Like, it doesn't matter what industry you're in, it's always just comforting to know that like, okay, like it just really helps having a group of other entrepreneurs, other people who are doing similar things, and just bouncing ideas off of and hearing what other people are going through. It really helps to keep things in perspective, especially as you're like growing and building. So I hope this is helpful. Let me know if you want to hear more videos like this. I obviously, like, for my job and life, go to events like this a lot and do things. One of my really big goals for this year and the next year and the coming year is really starting to bridge my two worlds, Guadeloupe, so French Caribbean, and New York. So just kind of bringing more exposure to a lot of the incredible things that are happening in the West Indies. Not just Guadeloupe, I think the West Indies as a whole, the Caribbean as a whole, has so much to offer, and I think that needs to be amplified. So I'm gonna be bringing you more, obviously, events and things that I'm going to that are related to that space. So if you wanna see more of that, let me know. If you have any questions, if you want to work with me, if you want to know more about what I do, you can obviously join the Patreon. That's like a way to have like one-on-one, just like direct access to me, but also just booking time or just becoming a client or doing work. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this, learned something, got some kind of inspiration. I am still in disbelief that I got stuck in the middle of a thunderstorm, but it's fine. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.